Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's FIDO Alliance webinar. I'm Megan Shamus. I am the Senior Director of Marketing at the FIDO Alliance, and we're really pleased to have our presenters here today to talk about some latest work coming out of the CDWG around making FIDO deployments accessible to users with disabilities. Today we have Christina Holka, who is our Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer, as well as Yao Ding, who is the Accessibility Research Lead at Meta, and Joyce Oshita, who is the Accessibility Test Engineer at Vmware. And both of these presenters have been really instrumental to helping us at the FIDO Alliance understand the needs for accessibility, particularly around strong authentication and with FIDO, and really to help show how we can leverage FIDO to make strong authentication more accessible. So I want to thank these speakers for being with us today. I want to just go over a few housekeeping notes, and then I will let us all get on with the webinar. So you are on On24, so welcome to On24. On your console in front of you, you'll see that we have a slides and media player. You can make these bigger or smaller depending on what your preferences are for watching the content. I will say that we will be pushing a few videos out through the media player, so just be aware of that and maybe plan to make that bigger. But generally, we'll be leveraging the slides for today's webinar. You'll notice there's a widget where you can ask questions, so please do leverage that, and we will have time for Q&A at the end if all goes as planned. We are recording the webinar, and we'll make the webcast as well as the slides available to you after the webinar. And then lastly, please do stay on at the end of the webinar and take the survey and let us know your thoughts. It really does help us to inform our efforts, educational efforts, the content that we push out there to all of you, and we really value your inputs there. So thank you, and with that, let me turn it over to Christina Holka, who will give us a little bit of a FIDO overview prior to the rest of the content. Christina?
Thank you, Megan. So just to sort of put this all into perspective from the FIDO context, so we really have a problem that we're trying to solve here. As you can see from these statistics that are coming up on the screen, there are so many challenges as it relates to passwords. We see so many breaches and hacks, and we see so many challenges with the use of passwords generally in the marketplace. We could talk for the whole hour on these statistics and the variety of attacks that we see out there, which are really proving to be more and more of a challenge as we move further into the digital world. So FIDO was established around 10 years ago now, really to bring together like-minded organizations who are thinking about how to solve the problem of passwords and really create a solution that is simpler, easy to use, still secure, based on public key cryptography. And so it's easy to use, it's secure, and everybody understands that. This slide here shows you our current set of board members. As you can see, we have a variety of different organizations, some very well-recognized names here, both on the supplier side as well as on the deployment side. So we have some strong financial services-based organizations here. We have identity focus. We have vendors who sell products in the security space. We have healthcare. So we really have a strong set of leaders in the FIDO Alliance to focus on this problem. And then now, as of today, we have very close to 300 members in total, as well as our liaison partners who are other like-minded organizations to really focus on solving this problem and bringing to you, both as consumers and as enterprise and as government services users, a really stronger and more robust but easy to use way of authenticating. Here's a list of some of the deployments, the recent deployments that we see out there. Again, a variety of different services in health, in financial services, in e-commerce, as well as you'll see here some enterprise and government-focused organizations. So we really are reaching the point now of ubiquity and mass deployment across multiple organizations in multiple markets. So what we really are looking at right now as FIDO Alliance and really focusing on as part of our core fabric is usability while keeping security in mind. So the security is there, but if you don't have an easy way of performing an authentication method, users are going to just bypass the security. They're going to find a way to do it. So usability is paramount to the success of FIDO and the strong authentication that is provided through our standards. So we really started focusing on this last year. We did a research project and delivered some UX guidelines on platform authenticators as the first phase. During this year, we established a user experience committee to really take a look at how we can deliver on this promise of simple to use. We also launched or announced Passkey this year, which provides a simple way for consumers to authenticate using devices that they already have. And we also published the security key UX guidelines. And currently the team is finalizing the UX design system. Next year, we're really looking at doing some in-depth research and UX guidelines on Passkey to provide guidance to implementers on how to really support Passkey in their products and services. Passkey, many people, it's a big word out there today, and certainly those of us in the industry are very, very familiar with it. It really provides a simple way for consumers to log in, and it's readily available on all of the users' devices. And it also is secure and is certainly better than a password. We do have these UX resources that are published on our website, the UX guidelines for desktop authenticators and security keys. It helps really give service providers a framework to ensure that when they're implementing FIDO, there's a consistent and better consumer experience, user experience. So as people become more familiar with FIDO authentication, it's consistent across all of the services they use. And then the FIDO design system, which is UX principles and journeys and patterns content and a UI kit to really kickstart FIDO projects as service providers are looking to implement FIDO. So then moving on to accessibility, earlier this year, our FIDO board agreed to commit to a diversity, inclusion, and accessibility focus for the Alliance. So I'm super excited as we go into 2023 to really focus on this as a core project for the Alliance, both internally as we take a look at our own tools and services, as well as looking further out as organizations implement FIDO. The first step in doing this is accessibility. And it's true that 15% of the world's population lives with a disability. I suspect it's more than that if you think about those of us who wear glasses, we forget to take our glasses, and various other aspects of society. And authentication is critical. It's a critical component of society. Everybody needs access to digital services, whether it be education, employment, entertainment, and there needs to be a strong authentication method that can really accommodate everybody around the world. So how we deploy FIDO authentication really matters, and how we think about accessibility is tremendously important to ensure that inclusion and accessibility for everybody looking to access their digital assets. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Yao Ding of Meta and Joyce Oshita of Vmware to really dig deeper on how FIDO thinks about accessibility with FIDO deployments and all the great work that the Consumer Deployment Working Group has done over the last year to really bring this awareness forward and deliver a white paper that explains how this all works together. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Yao and Joyce, who will walk you through the details. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I am Yao Ding. I lead accessibility research at Meta. And today I'm honored to be joined by Joyce Oshita from Vmware. Joyce, would you like to give a self-intro?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. I'm Joyce Oshita. I'm on the accessibility team at Vmware, where I'm currently focused on training and education. Um, I am completely blind, but I was sighted most of my life. And kind of that's, I needed accessibility to continue engaging in society. And when there was an opportunity um, for me to be involved with FIDO, I was like, well, I need to get involved in that because I need to make sure that authentication continues to be accessible for myself and for people that have other accessibility issues. And so that's kind of why I'm here and what I'm passionate about. And it's been just fabulous to have not only my voice heard, but be able to share it today. Um, but I think it's a mystery, right? Like everyone's like, yeah, we want to do accessibility, but what is that? And so, yeah, and I thought a good way of showing that is just kind of getting a sneak peek through a security key process, the prototype that we built in the UX committee, um, through my eyes. And so we have a short clip to kind of give you that perspective.
Yeah. Thanks, Joyce. It'll be really great to hear about your lived experience about authentication, about like everyday life as a blind person. And for those who don't know, Joyce is a key contributor to this white paper and a staunch and effective advocate for accessibility at Meta. And over the past year, Joyce and I have been working with the Consumer Deployment Working Group, chaired by Max Hatta from NTT Docomo. And we published a white paper on accessible deployment of FIDO authentication. And here I'm really grateful for the CDWG for everyone's contribution and support. And now you can download this white paper from FIDO knowledge base. And today we're going to delve into this white paper, and also you will be hearing about Joyce's lived experience as a blind user of FIDO. So next, we're going to show a short clip recorded by Joyce to give you a glimpse of what
no objects.
we'll talk
Windows
about
security
today.
dialog. Windows security continue setup. Insert your security key into the USB port. Touch your security key. Touch your security key. Getting things ready.
Yeah, so very soon we'll delve deep into this, screen reader experience of, adding a security key under the FIDO framework. And Joyce will be able to speak more about the opportunities and challenges in the whole UX process. Okay, so agenda, we'll talk about why accessibility matters. Christina has covered a big part of it. And then we will show a longer screen reader demo from Joyce. And then we'll talk about the potential barriers in authentication, specifically for users with disabilities. And then we'll cover some legal framework for accessible authentication, because accessibility is often grounded as a legal requirement. And then we're going to talk about the two current models of FIDO authentication and their implications for accessible deployment, the WebAuthn model and the UAF model. And then we'll reserve the rest of time for Q&A and discussion. So first, of all, why accessibility matters. There are just a lot of people in the world living with a disability. The World Health Organization just updated their estimate that 16% of the world population have significant disability, and that's about 1.3 billion people globally, or 1 in 6 people. And that's a lot of people. And this is a huge increase than their 2011 estimate, because the world population is steadily aging and people are living longer with disabilities, with functional limitations. So it goes without saying that people with disabilities shouldn't be left behind in this digital world. And these numbers are by medical definition, if we think about disability. However, there are many people beyond this 16% or 1.3 billion who are not medically diagnosed as disabled, who also face difficulties when they carry out their daily tasks. And here, disability is an experience when a mismatch happens between the person and the environment they live in, and when they interact with their environment or the product. And this is called the social model. I would like to hear Joyce to share her lived experience and why we want to look at disability from a social model rather than a medical term.
Yeah, I love that phrase, this it's a mismatch. And meaning that as someone's needs or functional abilities change, then the needs can actually, not addressing those needs can be a mismatch. So like I was telling Yao earlier, when we were meeting, I said, well, I was sighted most of my life. And so I first started getting poor vision. I wore glasses, stronger glasses. I started using more features, like I would magnify my screen, and so continue working, doing things with a larger text magnified. Then as it got worse, I would actually use text to speech. So I would select things with my mouse and then use a keyboard shortcut to have it read to me. And so I would use that. And then eventually, I was using a mouse and increasing the size of my mouse pointer, but that actually, it just didn't allow me to really engage with things on, applications or on websites. And so I had to move to a screen reader, which is like a different paradigm, right? I'm no longer, when you're using a screen reader, as you saw in the demo, everything is audio. You are just hearing everything read out to you, and you're no longer using your vision. You navigate, and I navigate just without a mouse, and I use just keyboard, using tab, shift tab, arrow keys, and different, keyboard shortcuts. And I guess what I found surprising was when I went to a screen reader, I actually gained more access than when I was trying to use my limited vision. But then I found that there were a lot of barriers, and that's what made me delve into accessibility and how I could impact this area and show people the mismatch. Okay, I know how to use these tools, but this site or this app isn't ready for me to be on your site. And so trying to solve that mismatch is why Yao and I are doing this presentation today.
Thanks, Joyce. It's really great to hear about your journey of accessibility and the involvement of the assistive text you relied on. And I think one important takeaway from your journey is that disability is really a spectrum. It can be a spectrum within a cohort, and it can also be a spectrum in a person as their ability and disability changes. And also this mismatch concept that disability, really happens when your personal need and functional abilities can no longer match what your environment and the product can offer.
Yeah, and I think
Thank you
the
so much.
mismatch sometimes from relying parties is they don't know who's on the other side. So
yeah, exactly. So this is why we wanted to kind of talk about, who are the people with disabilities as we talk about them. So when we talk about digital accessibility, it means that, the mismatch between technology and the user. Right? And as Joyce just said, disability can be really diverse in a person and within a disability cohort. And for simplicity, we often use a model that refers to like disability cohort. And here we introduce, 5 of them, the common accessibility cohorts. And first is cognitive and learning disabilities, including people who have difficulty reading, writing, remembering things, following plans, staying focused, and people who have mental disorders or who have neurodivergence. And then speech and language disability, ranging from speech loss to speaking loud and clear enough to be understood, focusing on speakers, or understanding language, like people have difficulty understanding written language, people who have dyslexia, or people who have difficulty understanding spoken language. And then physical disabilities, ranging from limb loss to weakness, people with limited reach, who have tremor or palsy, who have difficulty holding things steadily, or simply getting tired quickly. And visual disabilities, from total blindness to low vision, to visual field loss, or color blindness, and limited depth perception, which often happens when you have very unbalanced, visual acuity in 2 eyes. And people with hearing disabilities, people who are deaf, people who hear muffled sounds, or they hear with 1 ear, or their other sounds get in the way, either is their hearing or cognitive related hearing limitations. And each of these difficulties may have their implications for us when it comes to designing authentication experiences. And there's another important aspect of disability, which is called assistive technology, or AT for short. The concept is that people with disabilities, they usually use different types of assistive technology to gain access to the so-called mainstream technology through assistive tech. And I'll quickly go through a few examples of assistive technology used by each of the disability cohorts. For people with cognitive and learning disabilities, they may rely on a spelling check, grammar check, a simplified UI with simple language, with simplified workflows, or an interface with less visual density. For example, the focus mode, or reading mode on your browser, on many of the applications, or contextual prompts to remind the user to do certain tasks, and notifications. For people with speech and language disorders, sometimes they rely on a piece of technology called AAC, short for Alternative Augmentative Devices, which synthesize the speech based on the user's input. And people with physical disabilities, they use a wide range of what we call alternative control solutions that may include switches and sensors. They may rely on keyboard control for people who are not unable to use a regular mouse, or for people who don't have the dexterity to even use a keyboard, they may completely rely on voice control or eye control. And also there are macros or shortcuts to automate some frequent tasks. For people who have visual disabilities, they may rely on visual adaptations like font resizing, magnification, high contrast, or color filters if they have color blindness. And also for people who don't have like residual vision, they may rely on audio output like screen readers or text to speech or audio description when watching videos. And for people with hearing disabilities, they may rely on, especially for deaf people who don't have a usable, hearing, they may rely on visual output like real-time text, captions, and visual alerts instead of sound alert. They may also rely on some auditory adaptations like amplification or mono audio. So these are just some of the examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but to kind of show you the diverse range of assistive technologies that people may rely on to use mainstream technologies. And it's important that when we, a lot of them.
Yeah. I was going to say a lot of them are just productivity features too, right? Yeah. I mean, we're seeing they're not really just for people with disabilities, and you hear that all the time, like, well, I use that feature for captions is always a great example. Just talking to someone today about like, oh, well, that person they don't have a hearing issue, but they're like, actually, when I see the captions, it helps me understand the information better. So
yeah, exactly. That's a really great point. Look no further if you're using an iPhone or Android, and under system settings, you can find a big list of features under accessibility menu, and I would encourage you to try out some of them and kind of get some idea of how these features work for people with disabilities. And many of these features are kind of built into our mainstream technologies, and some of them are kind of standalone technologies that people need to purchase and to use with their iPhones or computers. So next, Joyce put together a really fantastic demo showing her experience adding a security key as a screen reader user. So I'll pass it over to Joyce to walk us through the demo.
Okay.
Yeah.
This security, Christina had mentioned that the UX committee had developed guidelines around security key. And this was a great project because we made sure that the components were accessible, that the prototype was accessible, and then we're showing this demo of what the experience is like completely without vision. And so it's a short demo. We're going to just watch it, listen to it, and then Yao and I will go through a few key areas that we have on some screenshots that we'll talk about. So you want to play the clip?
Yep.
Security and privacy document. Menu security and privacy settings heading level 1. Password and PIN enrolled heading level 2. Phone number enrolled heading level 2. Face or touch unlock heading level 2. Security key heading level 2. Add security key button. Add security key. Link sign out. Add security key heading level 1. A security key, S, allows you to complete two-step verification conveniently and more securely when signing into digital bank. To get started, give your security key a nickname so you know which key at later point in time. Security key nickname. Security key nickname, E.G. My main yellow K, E, Y. 1. Cancel button. Continue button. Windows security dialog. Windows security key setup. Set up your security key to sign into digitalbanktest.com as access 10. This request comes from Chrome, published by Google LLC. OK button Alt. O. Cancel button Alt. OK button Alt. Add security key Google Chrome. Button unavailable. Continue. Windows security dialog. Windows security continue setup. This will let digitalbanktest.com see the make and model of your security key. OK button Alt. O. Cancel button Alt. OK button Alt. Add security key Google Chrome. Button unavailable. Continue. Windows security dialog. Windows security continue set. No objects. Windows security dialog. Windows security continue setup. Insert your security key into the USB port.
So I'm physically putting in the security key.
Touch your security key. Touch your security key. Getting things ready. Getting things ready. Add security key Google Chrome. Add security key document. Button unavailable. Continue. Yes. Add another button. No. I'm done for now button. Security and privacy.
So that is an accessible experience, adding a security key and accommodating and anticipating that someone who uses just a keyboard is going to be adding a security key, and someone who is using a screen reader like I was doing has all the audio information, the information provided through audio to make the flow understandable, and when it's understandable, it's more secure. So we're going to highlight a couple of things in the next few slides. Just top level, I don't use a mouse. I'm navigating the interface completely with keyboard commands. And I'll tab through things, and I will navigate with screen reader navigation keys like headings and things, and enter key and things like that. So I'm going to have Yao help me through these next few slides, and we'll just kind of walk through some of the key concepts when we're talking about an accessible experience.
Yeah, so the first point we wanted to highlight is the ability to navigate a web page with a screen reader. And what I'm showing on the screen is a screenshot of the first page when there are some, I would say a lot of information, but they are kind of, first of all, visually organized by the headings. But for a screen reader user, Joyce, would you like to talk more about how you navigate a web page by the headings that has a lot of information?
So I think Yao made a good point. Visually, there are sections to this page. So the way that I'm able to receive that same information that he sees. So yeah, what are the visual sections of the page that you see in front of you?
Yeah. So the top part is cut off, but I believe there's a like username, password section. There's a phone number section, and what I'm seeing down below here is face or touch, unlock, and security key as two separate headings.
So when we were hearing the demo, I don't know if people remember, but there were areas where it would say password or face unlock, and it would say heading level 3. I was actually jumping through that page using heading navigation, and that's very important for me because there's a lot of information on that page. If I had to read all of it without the headings, not being able to jump, it would make it very difficult. So that's really key, headings, and to keep them the same experience of someone who's sighted sees it. So that was a great feature on this site. I think the next piece here was where we started getting into, jumped into the security key because I wanted to add it. And yeah, on this section, I remember we're reading the text under that area, but then I jumped into a button. It said like add security key, right? You see that visually.
Yeah, I see the add security as a kind of a section title, and it gives us a form where you can type in the a nickname for the security key and then buttons to confirm or cancel.
Yeah. And what was important was when I tabbed into the form field told me what to enter. I remember it said enter name, key name, and it's something like main yellow key, like an example. So it may not have appeared visually, but there could be underlying code that gives me the information that I need to complete that information. So properly labeled form fields and properly labeled buttons are critical for me that I could actually do the process.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really great point that, accessible design isn't about, making it, visually like large font size or good color contrast, but also at the underlying code level, you want to, code it properly so that assistive text, like a screen reader, can read it. If you code a heading as the right heading level, it shows, Joyce, okay, it's a heading level 2, what it is, with a meaningful, heading text. And also for the form, it tells you what the form is about. And also the buttons to show that a button, it is a button, it's clickable, and when you click with the action, it is going to happen.
And all of these components that are in this prototype are actually in the design system UX kit, and the accessibility key considerations are highlighted there. And it's just a great starting point to understand, how to make these kinds of flows accessible.
Yeah. Okay, so we're moving to the next screenshot, which is the security key setup. Do you want to talk more about this, Joyce?
This is where I think it was a different window. Is that the?
Yeah, it's a pop-up window. I think it's from Windows Security, and it shows like a prompt telling you that this is a like confirmation pop-up step for you to set up your security key to sign into this website, and tells you that this request comes from the browser Chrome, and
Yeah,
then allows you to, okay to confirm or cancel.
Okay. So this is actually a really important step. Like, I know because of the announcements that a new window is presented to me, and that was announced. So I had left the original site and it announced out that there was a new page. That's going to be really important in any FIDO experience, because there's always going to be an interaction with the RP site, with other portions of the experience, and that all needs to be accessible. One of the key pieces of making it accessible is to make sure one is that piece of information, the focus is managed, so I don't have to find the right window, but it's presented automatically, which in this experience it is. And then it announces out, it tells me what screen is being presented. And so this was a great experience of that.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much, Joyce, for walking us through this demo and the very pleasant and accessible user experience of adding a security key on this website. In next part, we're going to kind of expand on this and talk about the potential access barriers in authentication, for people with different types of disabilities. And you can see, how FIDO could potentially help overcome some of these barriers. I know, some of these are relevant to FIDO and some are not.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Like the current process with passwords for me is, cumbersome, and having focus shift from my computer to maybe a text message and trying to transfer that information is difficult. So just the basic security key feature is, I think, actually would help me. But then going into passkey experiences, um, those presented accessibly can be very valuable for people with any, all kinds of different functional limitations. So.
Cool. So the first, we're going through this, by the, disability cohorts we just talked about. So the first of our visual disabilities, people may have difficulty with, entering password if the UI is not fully accessible. For example, when we have missing labels in the form, or the, interface is not keyboard controllable, accessible. And people with visual disabilities are vulnerable to shoulder surfing or peeping. And people with eye conditions like cataracts or macular degeneration, those conditions may affect iris or retinal recognition, and also difficulty with positioning for facial recognition, or reading a one-time code on a small or non-backlit display, or like Joyce said, transcribing a one-time code from text message to a website or a mobile application.
Yeah, I think that, and then just really basic things too, right? Yeah, like color contrast issues and giving information in just color alone, like, click the red link or things like that. I think are simple fixes, but also make huge barriers for people. So we can highlight those easier things too.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for the addition, Joyce. And then people with physical disabilities, they may experience barriers with any authentication method that relies on like moving mouse, using a pen, or moving their fingers steadily. Or for people with limited reach, reaching or accurately targeting small security keys, or keys with really small or depressed touch areas. And this is relevant to kind of security hardware design, or typing on a keyboard or drawing a pattern. Some authentication methods do require those actions, and people may have difficulty manipulating a token or inserting a security key to the USB ports, or people who just need longer transaction time. They may be susceptible to shoulder surfing or peeping. And biometric scan, due to loss of physiological characteristics, for example, digital amputation, or having disease, just preventing development of fingerprints. Or fingerprints scan can be hard for people who have really dry skin, and this is very common among older users. People with cognitive and learning disabilities, remembering password or taking, challenge response tasks, or pattern gestures can be difficult, or understanding and following multiple steps of setting up or changing passwords. This is a really common barrier for people with cognitive and learning disabilities.
I think
and also
one thing,
people who,
I was going to say one thing that you were saying that, when there's functional limitations, the user actually has to create their own systems to enable them to do things, and those systems could actually make them more vulnerable to attacks. Like, what do people do when they can't remember passwords? They put a sticky note and put it on their, they're just making themselves less secure. So.
Yeah, I agree. And probably a very interesting user story I've heard is that some of our older users, they say, okay, I don't remember my username and password, and it's really difficult to almost impossible to reset password. So every time I need to use this app, I create a new profile. And if it's kind of a more personal thing like social media profile, they get more vulnerable. Like they just send out friend requests every time and to many strangers, and they are kind of more easily accepting friend requests and exposing them to online harms. So authentication does have a lot of kind of long-term or extensive impact on user experience to the entire product. And that kind of segues into the last point under cognitive disability. People may have issues with social judgment or gullibility or a lack of awareness of online harms. They may be susceptible to fraud and exploitation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And people with hearing disabilities, those challenge response where the challenge is presented in audio form, and also voice or speaker recognition. And that's also related to speech and language disorders. People have difficulty with voice or speaker recognition. So for FIDO specific authentication modalities, we created this mapping table between authentication methods and disabilities. And this table is linked in the white paper. You can see that no single authentication method is accessible to all people, to people with all types of disabilities. This is because there's just no silver bullet. And what we could potentially do is providing multiple options and allow the users to choose those authentication methods that best suits their personal needs and abilities.
I think what's great is there's so much advancement in this area too, because you think about people that are deaf, they rely on things that are visually presented to them, but also may benefit from haptic feedback. And I remember when haptic feedback was introduced, I thought, well, I don't see the value of that for me. But as I lost more vision, it just became imperative, right? Like I want that haptic feedback to know my device closed down, or that something changed, or I got a notification that's just shown visually. It's actually it's neat to see how all these features are working towards resolving those deficits in advance. So
yeah, exactly. And the more options we have, the wider range of the population will be able to accommodate.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping to the next one, we're going to talk about the legal frameworks for accessible authentication. In the interest of time, I'll probably speed through some of these slides. So why we talk about the legal requirements, because accessibility, as I said, is often grounded in the legal requirements because there are accessibility laws globally. And here are some examples. Like in America, there's Americans with Disability Act, ADA, or in EU, there are EAA or Accessible Canada Act. So in many regions or countries, you have to comply with these accessibility laws to reduce the risk of being sued or fined or even ejected from certain markets. And there are also a type of standards that are public procurement standards. Like in America, we have the Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act that requires government agencies or organizations receiving federal funding to only purchase products that meet these accessibility requirements as an incentive for manufacturers to make more accessible products. And we're going to talk about the WCAG. So why is this so important? WCAG is basically the industry gold standards for accessibility. And it's an extensive set of accessibility guidelines developed by the W3C. And it's by far the most universal and widely adopted, even though it's a set of normative guidelines. Many obligatory accessibility standards kind of directly refer to WCAG or mirror WCAG criteria. And there are many things we can do to meet WCAG. And so here I'm showing a typical product development, design and development life cycle. And I won't deep dive into this, but you can see that at each phase of it, there are many things we can do to bake accessibility into the process. I know that not all companies are equal and companies tackle accessibility in various ways, but here are some of the activities or best practices that companies practice accessibility in their product design development life cycles. And in WCAG, there is a specific guideline about accessible authentication. And again, this is kind of constantly evolving as this hasn't been incorporated into the official version of WCAG, but it's a proposal in the next version. And I will encourage you to read into it. There's only one of them, and there's many interesting kind of sufficient techniques where you can leverage to pass this requirement. And then in the white paper, we talk about two models of accessible FIDO authentication. One is the WebAuthn model, and one is the UAF model. And for each model, to make it easier to understand, we kind of presented the responsibility model by the different parties that are engaged in each model. So for example, for WebAuthn, there are three parties: the end users with disabilities, the user agents, which are any software or hardware, including assistive technologies, or the mobile phones, web browsers, or the screen readers that Joyce showed a demo about. And another party are the reliant parties applications, and that also include the authentication parts of the applications. And for each party, there's some things they could do to guarantee this is an accessible experience. For example, for end users, they may choose the user agents supporting authenticators that they are able to use. And for user agent developers, they need to ensure compatibility between their user agents and WebAuthn. And for reliant parties, we need to ensure that the applications are compatible with the user agents supporting WebAuthn. And we also need to create accessible UX when it comes to authentication, which include the conformance to WCAG accessible authentication requirement. And similarly, we provided this responsibility model for UAF as well. I will skip this slide, but you can find more details in the white paper. And by the end of the white paper, we provided some really top-line principles of deploying accessible authentications. Principle number one is that reliant parties should design and implement authentication user interfaces and training materials to meet WCAG level AA and conduct user testing with users with various types and degrees of disabilities. Principle number two is specific to WebAuthn. So when implementing WebAuthn, the reliant party should not discriminate based on authentication modalities. Principle number three is specific to implementing UAF. We recommend that reliant parties comply with the guidelines described in the UAF responsibility model. So you can find these principles in the white paper. And another thing we wanted to highlight, and Christina just talked about in the beginning, and also Joyce mentioned it, that FIDO has created this UI kit with accessible components. So in the demo that Joyce showed, that adopted some of the accessible components. It is kind of a good start for your product teams to start kind of adopting these components because there are many accessibility considerations that goes into these components. And
I guess it's scary
Joyce.
though. I mean, like that's a lot. It's a lot if it's just like an introductory piece, right, about accessibility and how to make the experience accessible. And I think it's scary. So we'll take the next part, and Yawana does a good job of it, is like, how do you get started, right? I don't hear you.
Oh, I thought it was me.
Oh,
Hi,
sorry.
Joyce. Yeah, are you with us still? Okay, just making sure.
Yes, sorry, I was muted just now. Yeah, so it's important to kind of start the conversation with your colleagues, with your leadership, because very often people shy away from talking about disability or accessibility due to the either lack of awareness or didn't know the appropriate language to talk about it. So we do encourage you to start the conversation. And if you are like a product practitioner, find ways to test accessibility by experts, because in the accessibility industry, there's a big group of specialists, who help conduct and evaluate product accessibility, and also test accessibility with your real world users who have disabilities. It's really important to incorporate their perspectives into your products. And also refer to the white paper. It's a really excellent resource to learn about this topic and to learn about the legal framework and to learn about some practical guidelines for deploying accessible authentication. And last but not least, there are a lot of really valuable accessibility training resources, and some of them are free and public to everyone. For example, the IAAP, International Association of Accessibility Professionals, they have a certificate program. They also offer some training materials. And also Section 508 Trusted Tester I believe it's free, and their training resources is really fantastic. And if you follow the link to W3C accessibility training resources, it's also a really great place to learn to get started. And there's also one called WebAIM, WEBAIM. There's also a lot of, easy to understand, training resources in lay language, without any, much technical terms in there. So Joyce, do you have anything you want to add?
I guess I just want to say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask. And I think that in terms of FIDO experiences, the UX committee is trying to elevate the accessibility conversation. So you can always contact FIDO, and if you need help with understanding what that looks like. And yeah, it's a process, and we're just inviting you to just be part of that process.
Thanks, Joyce. We are at time, but I wouldn't mind staying a few minutes longer to take any questions, or if we have anything to discuss. Probably back to you, Christina or Megan.
Oh, yes. And I believe that the gingerbread house making competition started at the office that I'm at right now. But so if you hear any background noise, I would love if we could just stick around for a couple more minutes. We do have a few more questions. We do have a few questions that I'd love to ask Yao and Joyce. And just thank you so much. And just want to say again that just having Joyce and Yao, within our membership and, really enlightening us all, at the FIDO Alliance on this has been just amazing. I know I personally hadn't experienced or seen, what it was like from the perspective of someone who's disabled, like the screen readers, for example. It really opened my eyes to a subject that I hadn't been knowledgeable about. And now, we're able to kind of bring that into our own web properties and, ensure that the materials that we're putting out are as accessible as possible. So again, I just want to thank both of you for that and for your efforts here. Just one question. So with FIDO, and I think it was directed at Joyce, obviously with FIDO and platform authenticators, the operating system plays a big part in that authentication flow. And so the question is, how should RPs plan or design their flows so that that prompt isn't like confusing or jarring for someone that is like enrolling for the first time and isn't expecting an OS prompt? And I guess the first part of the question is that confusing when that prompt
I think it's actually the platform vendor that has control over the announcement of the prompt. I don't think it's
so the
RP,
question is, should the RP like prime you for that to be coming? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I've seen that before where it'll say something like navigating to and provide that priming. That would probably be ideal. That's something we could look at in these especially with the passkey experience. So that's a really great point.
Thank you, because I know even from my perspective that, and with some of the user testing that we did with folks, without disabilities, they even find that to be a little jarring when you get that OS prompt. So some of that priming is sometimes nice to alleviate that. So the other question I wanted to ask was around the training. So you made a point about scary training and how to start. Could you sort of elaborate on that and how you might suggest getting started? I know you kind of covered it, but to get started within an organization.
With getting your people trained, I guess.
Yeah.
What I would do if you're the one that's going to be the accessibility voice and get things heard, the first thing is just like put down your mouse and see if you can navigate. And what I do some accessibility mentoring out at VMware, and one of the tasks I said is, well, go to your favorite website and see if you could make a purchase without your mouse. and you start understanding what the issues are. But WebAIM, I actually think it's a super easy way to explain things. You could go onto the WebAIM portal, drop in a URL, and it'll run automated tests. Now, automated tests don't catch everything. It just catches things that are problems with the code and things like that. But it's a good way to see, like, you know, what are we even talking about? So that, and then the resources that Yao shared also. And I guess the other, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick add. I think, you know, the trainings are helpful in a way that it helps you to learn the you know, nomenclature, you know, how we talk about disability and accessibility, and some of the talking points, you know, why it matters to your products, and probably some of the, you know, DIY or some, you know, easy accessibility testing that you can do by yourself, like Joyce said. And for us, we have like those really interesting activities that we introduce to our colleagues who are new to accessibility. Like we had a No Mouse Monday, exactly what Joyce said, you know, test your products without using a mouse, just completely on keyboard, or, you know, test, you know, a screen reader experience by turning on, you know, VoiceOver on your iPhone or MacBook. Yeah, some activities you can run by yourself or with your colleagues who, you know, who are really keen on accessibility.
And I guess if you're looking for some feedback on, you know, accessible FIDO experience, you know, reach out and send a message to FIDO, and we're trying to look at, you know, doing pre-testing, pre-research on that experience. If you have something out there, you know, we have a small group of people on the UX committee looking specifically at accessibility, and we're doing some pre-testing on that. So, you know, maybe that would be a quick session with the group. It's a shared responsibility, like Yao had mentioned in the white paper it's presented. And what's great about platforms like this is, like, we're trying to make that a conversation rather than a list of do's and don'ts.
Right, and specifically, you could shoot an email to info@fidoalliance.org. And again, you know, if you're looking to get engaged or looking to join in on this early testing, please get in touch with us. That would be fantastic. Or just otherwise want to get engaged, always feel free to reach out to us. But with that, we're going to wrap up. If we did not get to your question, I'm going to pass them along to Joyce and Yao, and we'll definitely get in touch with you to answer your question one-to-one. But I want to thank everyone for joining again, to thank our presenters, Joyce and Yao, for this wonderful presentation, but of course, all the hard work that went into the white paper. On your console, these resources that Yao has here are directly linked there. So you can download the white paper or access any of these links, as well as the FIDO UX system, the design system that's on our website. And we'll also send along these materials in the wrap-up note following the webinar. So thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you soon on another FIDO webinar. And Happy New Year to all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.